Hey and welcome. This is Denise from Lil Owls Studio, and today we will be editing one of the spring blossoms photos that I just took last week. So this is the photo I'm going to edit today. I am working in some of the preset collections that I have. I love the seasons presets currently, just because I am in a dark and moody artistic phase currently. And what I like about the presets is they give you a lot of different looks very quickly. And then, you can just kind of scroll through and see, what can I get with this photo without having to do all that work manually. And so this collection really suits the style that I am currently loving. And I'm going to go for this Seasons 23. I have edited several of these spring photos with this preset, so using presets are a really nice way to get a consistent look across a whole collection. So I'm going to stick with the preset that I've been using, but it is really fun as you scroll through these to see, because see, like that one right there was really beautiful too. It's really fun to see the different looks your photo can give you, and it's so much faster than editing all these steps manually. So I really love just taking a scroll through the different sets and seeing, what look do I love today, what grabs me. Sometimes I don't have a finished look in mind when I take a photo. I'm kind of waiting until I get to the processing side and letting something surprise me. So I'm going to go for that Seasons 23. I'm going to adjust my exposure a little bit more and tweak the highlights and the shadows. 'Cause these presets are 100% adjustable, and they don't change your exposure, so you can set the exposure and then run through the different presets and see the looks you'll get, which I love that. And then if we scroll down, most of my presets have a curve in them, and a lot of people ask, how do I get such a soft look to my photos? And some of the look is coming from the lens, like I'm using a Lens Baby Velvet lens on this with an aperture set at about between a 4 and a 5.6. So you're getting a little bit of softness from that lens, and if we zoom in, you can see I'm still getting some nice pretty crispy details, especially here with the pollen that's on these flowers. But I'm getting an overall soft look, and some of that's coming from the lens and some of it's coming from this curve, and I really like the matte feel that you get with the blacks pulled up, so you see it's more of a very dark gray rather than a black. If you don't like that, you can pull that right out, and if you like it extra, you can push that even higher up to get kind of that very yummy matte film kind of feel. So that's how I get a lot of that softness in there. Another thing that I like to do is come on down to the sharpening, and if you'll hold down your Alt key on a PC or your Option key on a Mac, you can mask out exactly what's being sharpened. And the reason why you want to do this is basically an unsharp mask in Photoshop. So what it's doing is it's sharpening every single pixel. When you see everything that's white, that's being sharpened. So every single pixel is being sharpened. And what you're doing, if you leave it at that full white mask, is you're adding unnecessary extra grain to your photo. So I like to pare that back to just the areas that I want to be sharpened, and that's my subject and some edges. And so if you'll mask that off by holding down that Alt Option key, then you can only sharpen what was really important, and you'll leave all of the background and the other areas unsharpened, so you're not adding tons of extra grain. And then sometimes I like to test out what it would look like if I did the corrector mode there. So you can see it thinks that that vase was not as straight as it could have been. So I'm actually going to leave that right there. I don't usually do very much cropping when I take photos, because my goal when I'm shooting is to get the very best picture composition and everything right out of camera, so that when I get to the processing side and the adding textures side, it's much easier and faster because I've already done all the hard work in camera. But sometimes my head is tilted, and so then my photo is slightly tilted, so I will do some slight straightening, but it's very rare that I do much cropping. I'm really looking for the most beautiful photo out of camera that I can get, and then I will further adjust and tweak that in Lightroom and Photoshop with textures and color to get like a final kind of artistic photo. So let's go ahead, and I'm really happy with where this is sitting. So I'm going to go ahead and pop this in Photoshop. And there we go. So once I've got this in Photoshop, there are a few steps that I will take before I start adding textures. And one of those is to add the high pass filter. So I'm going to duplicate that background and call that high pass. And what this is going to be a second layer of sharpening, but it's different than what we did in Lightroom. This is going to tighten up all the edges, whereas in Lightroom we were kind of tightening up all the pixels that we had highlighted. So I'm going to go to Filter, Other, High Pass Filter, and you'll see in a moment how much this tightens us up. I do have that sitting at about a 12 pixel. I had somebody recently say, oh, I thought you were supposed to put that at 3 or 4 or 5. Why do you set it so high? And I do that for a reason, because in general, you don't want to over sharpen it, because then you add weird halos and sometimes you make things look fake. But if you start off at a little higher pixel layer on that high pass filter, then you're less likely to have to redo it when you under sharpened. So what I like about using this high pass layer is now I can adjust the opacity. So you can push that up as high or as low as you want. We can zoom in and take a look to see what we're getting. If I turn it off and turn it on, you can see how that really tightened up all those edges for us. And then we can adjust that visually to where we'd like it to actually be sitting. So I've got the high pass. Another thing that I really love to do, especially lately, is add a blue layer. So I'm going to come down here to my half white, half black bubble, and I'm going to add a levels layer. And I'm going to not be on the default level. I'm not trying to change the exposure or anything. I'm going to go directly to the blue level. And I'm going to come down to the bottom line, and I'm going to pull those colors in so that I end up with some shade of luscious blue, kind of like right in there. So I'm at 59 and 216, and I don't get exact on that. I just pull it in until it's a nice, rich, yummy blue color, which of course I'm not going to leave at 100%. But if you'll take that down to under 10%, and if I turn that off and turn that on, you'll see it gives a very slight kind of luminous blue quality to the photo, which I just find magical. And it's not for everybody, but it is a really fun trick or technique. And usually when I have put this on my photos on top of everything else that I've done, I have the most compliments on coloring for the photos. It's just a nice little trick to put in there. So go ahead and name that so we don't forget what we did. And I just love that extra little luminous quality that gives. Another thing that I love to do, and I promise we're going to get to textures here pretty soon, but another thing that I love to do is I love to add a blank layer, and I've got a gray already up here. It's 7F, 7F, 7F. And what that is kind of right here in the middle of the grays. It's a really nice middle of the road neutral gray color, and I'm just going to take my paint bucket and paint that layer, that blank layer that we just created. I'm going to paint that and then change the layer to soft light, and I'm going to call that layer Dodge Burn, because what I'm going to do is do a little bit of dodging and burning on my photo to really make the highlights and the shadows pop. And you can dodge and burn right on a photo layer if you wanted to. You could duplicate that background layer and dodge and burn on a copy of the photo. But the reason why I don't do that is because it slightly changes the colors sometime. Whereas if we'll do it on a gray layer, we keep those colors nice and crisp and clean, and we don't distort or change them in any way. So I'm right over here in my dodge burn tool. So you've got dodge and burn, and I'm going to dodge the highlights at a really low exposure, about 25%. And what's really nice about using that on a low opacity is I could swipe back over it more than once if I needed to make it stronger, so we're not going to overdo it right up front. And then if I needed to make it a little bit less strong, I can always turn the layer opacity down, and that will take down the strength of what I did. And I'm going to go through and just kind of hit all the different spots that have some highlights that I might want to just kind of give an extra pop to. And once I'm done, I'll turn that layer off and turn it on, and you'll see just that tiny bit of extra that we created. And I'm even doing it over here in the blur part because I don't want it to pop really nicely in the in focus parts and forget the blur. And if you do an area like I just did right there and you don't like the way it looks, just hit your Command or Control Z there and back up. And then once you've kind of got that where you like it, and do spend a little bit of time on that, I'm going a little faster than I might normally go. Once you've kind of got that sitting where you want it, then I'm going to switch over to the burn tool, and I'm going to burn the midtones. And you can burn the midtones or the shadows, but if you're burning, you want the darker colors. If you're dodging, you want the high midtones or highlights. So I'm going to be burning the midtones at about still 25%, and I'm just giving some extra detail even in the shadows, because you even want detail in the darkness. And I'm just kind of hitting the dark spots there. I'm not hitting the highlights this time, so I'm hitting the darker parts of the flower to really make those pop. Alright, so let's see what we got. So if we turn that layer off and back on, you can see that we've really made some of these areas pop really nicely. And we can turn the opacity down a little bit if we want. But I'm really happy with that. That's really pretty. And once you've got this where you want it, and I do all that work before I ever consider adding a texture. Now I go into a texture collection and I think, what is it that I'm looking to do with this photo? And I'm looking for, something with some interesting texture. I don't want it to overpower the photo itself, because my style with texturing now is that it enhances my overall artistic view that I had going. And I usually want to add detail in the areas around my subject, but still letting my subject shine. There's several different philosophies with using textures. Some people replace the backgrounds. Some people want texturing to be very heavy. I like to, at this point in time, I like to enhance what the photo's already got going on in it, so my texturing is not as heavy as it used to be. And some of that is just growing in your art form and figuring out what you like and don't like. So I'm just going to randomly pick one. Look how beautiful that is. And I'm going to show you some different techniques that I then do to the texture layer. So this texture is very warm, and I want to not really change the coloring I already had. So I'm going to come into image adjustments, hue, saturation, while I have the texture layer highlighted, and I'm just going to pull that color out. I might leave it a little bit, but I don't want it like it was. And then it's too dark, so I'm going to go back into image adjustments, levels, and I'm going to lighten the texture part up so that it's better for what I had in mind. Let's put it right there. And because this one is really heavy right on my subject, I am going to lower the opacity just a little bit, and then I'm going to add a mask to that layer. And I'm going to mask this off of my subject quite a bit. So I'm working with a soft round brush at a very low opacity. I'm going to set that at about 25% because I can always take it off in stages. I don't want to overdo it right off the bat. And I'm using a soft edge on the brush because I don't want what I'm masking off to be super obvious. So I'm on the black color here, so black will take away, and the white, if I need to put some back, white will let me put some back. So I'm just going to come through here and kind of mask. I don't want it to be super obvious that I've just taken it off of one area, so I am being a little more haphazard and letting some of my brush strokes get into this darker area also. I don't want it to be really stark that there's texture, no texture. So I do want that transition to be softer. Ooh, look at that. That's really beautiful. And there's one thing here that I noticed that I probably should have taken out or cloned over, and that's this bright pink here. And so what I might do, and I may have to redo my high pass filter after I do this, but I might use the spot healing tool and just see if I spot heal that off, if that's less distracting. And I do like that quite a bit better. So actually my spot healing tool, that wasn't an edge that I was sharpening, so the high pass filter wasn't defining it to the point that it still looks like there was a flower there, so I can leave it. But if I had changed something on one of these that had tight edges, I would have had to delete the high pass filter layer and redo it. Just something to keep in mind. Alright, so that is a lot of my current editing workflow and how I like to use textures. I do go for the very best photo out of camera that I can get, and when you're just starting out with textures, you know, start with where you're at and grow from there. So it has taken me many years to get to this point. Now I'm trying to enhance the beautiful photo that I got. Before I was trying to change whatever photo I got into some magical piece of art with the textures I was using. So the longer you do this, the more your goals for what you're trying to achieve will shift, and that's okay. That's what makes using textures and working with photography over the years, that's what keeps it exciting and keeps you coming back for more. So I hope you love these yummy edits that we did. The seasons presets and this Hyde Park you can find right below this video. These are really pretty subtle texture with beautiful details in them, so I really love this collection, and some fun light techniques. Like this one has a really beautiful bright upper corner and kind of fades to the dark. So these are some of the different things that I'm looking at and considering when I'm looking at the textures. What is the texture that it's giving me, and what is the light and the color doing? So I hope you love checking out these, and they'll be right below the video. And I can't wait to see what you do with some of these techniques, and I'll see you next time. Thanks.